you start off functionally as a blank slate. You just here, you flesh flopping around, right? We teach you how to perform yourself over time. You learn that you can both get benefits for how you perform yourself and there can be consequences. Thus you learn to self-police yourself, right? So, for example, why are you not constantly stealing from every store you go in? Because there are consequences to stealing, right? Which someone taught you. Right? But if no one ever taught you that there were consequences to stealing and you never got caught, you would just steal. Because no one taught you that. So my point is that everything that you know about yourself, right? Yourself, who you are, is not some locked off space that you got all the agency and you determine who you are. Right? To think so is simplistic and immature. Right? Your life very much so is built upon what others have taught you to be and how you then inhabit or respond to what other constraints people put on you. And so you can be out the box and trying to not constrain yourself, but you are doing that in relation to the constraint itself. Okay? And so let's make this a wider concept. If we were talking about black and white, we're talking about race issues. African Americans, for example, have developed this culture. We have black culture, right? We call it in the United States. And so we have these cultural practices that sort of transgress across geographic boundaries, etc. And so black people will often say, you know, that this is black culture. We can be outside of whiteness when we're in black culture. And when people say that, it makes no sense to me. Because black culture, as we understand it in American society, only exists in its relationship to whiteness. Right? We developed blackness in response to white supremacy. Right? Our practices of survival have been developed in the face of gratuitous violence. Right? So what we think of as blackness in and of itself in American culture, right, is necessarily bound up with our relationship to white supremacy. Right? So how we perform ourselves as black, right, is often a reaction or a response to how we have been positioned as black within a world that is anti-black.
So when Wilson is talking about how like black women give birth to commodities, does that commodity is that like the same time as you would say the blank slate, or does that come after the blank slate? Like is that a relationship that's formed post birth, or is that like?
It's a relationship that I think that you are born, once you are born black, right, you have already been born into a certain kind of constraint, right? So you are, it's like, you know, from birth, right? To be born black is to be born particularly marked and with particular kinds of constraints, right? So if your body is marked as black, you are already marked as criminal, right? You are already marked as slave, you are already marked as object, right? All you can then do is respond to that marking and choose how you have agency in how you respond to the marking in a lot of ways, but even that is constrained, right, by how you've been taught to exist as a black man or a black woman or whatever within your culture, right? So some parts of black culture would teach you if you are black from birth within an anti-black context, then the way in which you react to that is to fight the system aggressively, right, and to directly assault whiteness, to directly battle it, right? Another part of black culture may very well tell you that the best way to respond to anti-blackness is for you to use class as a shield for anti-black imaging or politics, right? So you should go to college, you should get a good job, you should live middle class, you should live in neighborhoods where you are likely to be, so that you aren't gratuitously just randomly pulled over by the cops, right? So people tell you that those things will offer you some form of protection, right? And then, you know, we get, Henry Louis Gates, who gets arrested outside of his big nice house, despite the fact that, you know, he's a professor and one of the most significant black scholars in the country, right? Because he was breaking into his own house because he locked himself out, right? So they arrested him. So that's what we mean, right? So performance is this idea that we are not these solitary soul individuals. I am my own rock. I shall not be formed by anyone, right? That's just an impossible thought. Because everything that you are has been formed in interaction with the society that you live in, within the culture that you participate in, within the discourses that frame and surround that culture. So what do I mean by discourse? Discourse. Discourse I also sort of think about as a sort of, as a field of signification, which I'm also going to explain, so don't be confused. Okay, signification just refers to how does something mean? How does something mean something to us? So if I walked up to you and just slapped you in your face, right? You would be like, that's just dirty. Shanara, how you just gonna be slapping people in their faces, right? Because that's not cool, that's not okay. But the only reason why you would react like that is because slapping someone in the face signifies anger or frustration or an attack. It means an attack on you. So you will respond as if I have attacked you. Right, but say if I lived in a different culture where the way that you say hello is to slap somebody in the face, and so I slap you in the face to say greetings, and you punch me in the mouth, and I'm like, whoa, why was that necessary? What happened? You have just assaulted me. And you're like, no, you assaulted me first. Does this make sense to you? So signification is within a culture, within a society, how do things come to mean something, right? So how does black come to mean criminal? How does black come to mean slave? Right, those are the processes of signification, how something comes to mean something. All right, so then discourse sort of refers to that entire field of signification of a culture or a society. Right, so America has fields of signification, how we come to know things. So how do we come to know things about black people? How do we come to know things about women? How do we come to know things about what it means to be American, or what it means to be human, or what it means to not be Arab, or not be Muslim, or not be the terrorist, which all mean the same thing in the American vocabulary. Right, so what we're talking about here is the sort of, for us, because we focus on the topic in a lot of ways, we're talking about a field of signification that's American, but also that then has its basis within a Eurocentric field of signification, which all sort of culminates in this sort of larger field that's based on Western Enlightenment, the idea of the Cartesian subject, the idea that we have rationality and logic, and that's the basis of argumentation and universal principles. So when I say discourse or field of signification, what I'm talking about is how we talk about things to one another transmits meaning to one another. Okay? So when someone says something racist to you,